Good afternoon and welcome to the FEMA Region 2 Individual and Community Preparedness Webinar Series. My name is Anastasia Powell and I'm a Regional Preparedness Liaison for FEMA Region 2. I'm going to provide a few technical considerations before we begin. Today's proceedings are being recorded and captioned. You should hear audio through your computer speakers, so please ensure your volume is turned up so you may hear the proceedings accordingly. You can enable closed captioning by clicking the CC button in the top menu of the screen and click Show Captions. You can export those captions by clicking Export. In the top right corner, we ask if you'd like to receive news updates from Region 2. If so, please enter your email address and we'll be sure to add you to our distribution list. In order to be considerate and respectful to everyone attending and presenting today, all attendees are muted. We ask that all participants keep the chat dialogue on topic and courteous to ensure everyone has a positive learning experience. Please make sure your username is respectful and appropriate. Please see instructions on how to change your username in the pod to the left of the poll question or Q&A pod. We will have a question and answer session after the presentation concludes. You'll see a Q&A pod in the lower right-hand corner. Please feel free to submit your questions about the subject matter there, and time permitting, we'll do our best to answer them. Below the chat box, we have a poll question. Please take a moment to answer it before the presentation begins. Finally, the PowerPoint presentation from today will be available for you to download in the file share pod as a PDF. You can click on the file and download it using the download button. With that, I'd like to turn it over to the FEMA Region 2 Community Preparedness Officer to introduce our speakers in today's proceedings.
Thanks, Stacy. Did you know the National Fire Protection Agency estimates there were over 1 million career and volunteer firefighters in the United States in 2020? Of the total number of firefighters, 35% were career firefighters and 65% were volunteer. Good afternoon. I'm Debbie Costa, the Community Preparedness Officer for FEMA Region 2. Every 23 seconds, a fire department in the United States responds to a fire somewhere in the nation. The number of fires and fire deaths have decreased significantly since the 1970s, thanks to the combined efforts of nonprofit, federal, local, and community-based organizations, but most of all, the firefighters who make every effort to prepare and respond to fires across the country. Today's webinar will focus on the Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program, AFGP, which funds critically needed resources to equip and train emergency personnel, enhance efficiencies, and support community resilience. Our speakers today will provide a brief overview of the AFG grants, grant management, and grant writing. In addition, they will provide tips on how to develop a successful grant application. Our speakers today will be Brian Thomas and Rita Verano-Beck. Brian Thomas is the Fire Program Specialist for FEMA Region 2 and has worked on the program for many years now. Rita Verano-Beck is a grants management specialist in FEMA Region 2 who works mostly on preparedness grants. With that, I'd like to hand the mic over to Rita to get us started.
Thanks, Deborah, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As Deborah stated, Brian and I work in FEMA Region 2, and Brian is our Regional Fire Program Specialist. He is going to be monitoring the chat throughout the presentation and will jump in at times to help add information. Before we get started, I'm just going to go over some helpful resources here. So Brian and I first want to emphasize that the application deadline for the FY22 AFG program is just 10 days away. It is on February the 10th. So after today's presentation, if you need any help with your application, please feel free to reach directly out to Brian at 917-561-3294 or brian.thomas@fema.dhs.gov. In addition to Brian, we also have the Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program Help Desk, which is staffed Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. by fire service professionals. The AFG website, www.fema.gov/firegrants, has a lot of really helpful resources to help you with your AFG application. It includes an application checklist, a narrative development guide, a cost share calculator. So don't hesitate to jump onto our website for resources. If you have any technical difficulties with your AFG application, also remember that there is a FEMA Go technical support help desk. We will touch on SAM.gov shortly, but if you have any challenges with your SAM.gov registration, please feel free to reach out to the Federal Service Help Desk. And again, the AFG Help Desk is staffed Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. by fire service professionals. Okay, now on to our presentation for the FY22 program. So quickly, Brian and I are going to touch base on, the AFG application, what is funded, what is not, how to prepare to apply, and give you some, good tips on developing a successful application. We hope you will leave here today being able to pass the computer pre-scoring phase. So in FY22, Congress appropriated $720 million for firefighter-related programs. $324 million was allocated for AFG alone, which we will discuss shortly. An additional $360 million was allocated for the SAFER program, which is the Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response program. This program provides funding to fire departments to increase staffing to meet national standards, either through hiring full-time staff or the recruitment and retention of volunteers. In addition, an additional $36 million was allocated for the Fire Prevention and Safety Program, which provides funding to bolster fire prevention activities as well as fund studies that could impact fire service and firefighter safety. Now, who is eligible to apply for an AFG program, for an AFG grant? Fire departments, non-affiliated EMS organizations, and state fire training academies are eligible to apply for an AFG grant. And you might ask, how is funding for the AFG program determined? So Congress actually determines how AFG funds will be disseminated. For this year, career, combination, and volunteer fire departments will each receive no less than 25% of the $720 million appropriation. 10% is set aside for open competition. So you might actually go up slightly and get a little more than 25%. And how is the cost share for the AFG program allocated? Oh, you know what? I'm going to go back one quick second on how funding is allocated. Just want to emphasize that state fire training academies will receive no more than 3% of the $720 million. Non-affiliated EMS, no more than 2%. So we really want to make the distinction between the no less than and no more than set-asides, so people realize everything is being done as much as possible to equally distribute funds for all types of fire service professionals. Next, the cost share requirement. As you are aware, most federal grant programs have a cost share requirement. For AFG, your cost share requirement is determined by your population size. So if you have a community of 1 million or more people, you're required to contribute 15% of your total project costs for the AFG program. For populations of 20,000 to 1 million people, you're required to contribute 10% of the total project costs. And for populations of 20,000 and less, you're required to contribute 5% of the total project costs. Applicants should ensure that the population size on your AFG application is relatively consistent with what is listed in the Census Bureau, because at some point during the application process, somebody will cross-check your population with what is listed in the Census Bureau, by the Census Bureau. And if it is substantially different, your application will be rejected. In addition, it's really important to note that your cost share must be a cash match. It does not have to be allocated in your local budget at the time of your application, but you must contribute 5, 10, or 15% of your total project costs, depending on your population size. And in-kind matches are not the same and do not qualify as your cost share or match. Next, how is the list of funding priorities determined for the AFG program? So hopefully by now, everyone on this webinar is familiar with the FY22 NOFO for the AFG program. If you're not, I urge you to go on our website or Google FY22 AFG NOFO. Being that the application deadline is just 10 days away, we really need to start helping you prepare to complete your application. In the NOFO, you will see that funding priorities are established, and it's the criteria development panel that develops the funding priorities for the AFG program. You can see here that there's a list of extensive list of fire service professionals that serve on the criteria development program to help determine the funding priorities for the program. FEMA relies on these fire service professionals to help determine those funding priorities, and they meet annually to discuss the program, determine what's important, and determine the funding priorities. If you have any questions about the direction of the program or you would like to be nominated to sit on the criteria development panel, I urge you to reach out to your affiliate of the respective organization and ask to be nominated. Now, understanding the award process for the AFG program. So, as indicated, all federal grants essentially begin with a NOFO. The NOFO lists the most important information pertaining to your grant application. It lists your funding periods, how much your local match is required, and it indicates right here what your application period is. So the deadline for the FY22 program is 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on February 10th. Once all applications are submitted, they will move to the electronic scoring process. And then they will move to a peer review panel where fire service professionals will review the application and give it a score. The electronic score and the peer review score will be averaged, and then funding determinations will be made with a ranked score order. Then they will move to a technical review process. And this is actually the first time that FEMA will see your application. All applications in the fundable range will undergo a technical review, and then FEMA is just cross-checking it for accuracy. Is your census information consistent? Is what you requested and approved for, allowable? Is the request reasonable? And then once your items are determined reasonable in your population size, the award announcement, begins. So we touched on the NOFO slightly earlier, and again, we want to reiterate that the NOFO contains the list of funding priorities for the FY22 program, and you will see a red H, a blue M, or an L. We urge you to only apply for items in the NOFO that are listed with a red H for high funding priority. These are the items that the criteria development panel determined are high priority for the current fiscal year. You can try applying for other items in the medium to low range, but this is one of the most competitive federal grant programs, and the probability of funding being left over for medium or low priorities is pretty low to none. So only apply for items listed with a high priority. Next, in order to create and submit a application for an AFG grant, you're going to have to submit your application in FEMA Go. And in order to do that, you're going to need a SAM.gov registration. So be aware of the SAM scam. If you Google SAM.gov, an agency will be populated that will gladly offer to charge you $600 to help you with your SAM.gov registration. But the registration is actually free. So please don't fall for the SAM scam. Log on if you encounter any issues for creating your SAM.gov account. You can always contact the Federal Service Help Desk. It typically takes a couple weeks for a SAM account to be created. So at this point, since the application deadline is only 10 days away, you might want to consider reaching out to, your local town to utilize their SAM account if you don't have your own active registration. But you have to be sure to keep constant communication with whoever the contact listed in your SAM account is, because FEMA will be communicating with that contact regarding your award status. Next, by now, after you have your SAM account info and you've reviewed the NOFO, now you can go on to go into FEMA Go and create your AFG application. If you don't already have a FEMA Go account, when you log on to the website, you're going to click the Create an Account button. And when you get in, something similar to this slide here will populate. On the left-hand column, if you have a pending application or a current award, that is where you will find that information. And over here on the right, if you need to create a new application, that is where you will go and you'll click the Start Here hyperlink. Preparing to apply. So before you actually even log into FEMA Go, I would like for you, Brian and I would like for you to do a couple of things to prepare your application. First and foremost is establishing your own needs assessment. Okay? One of the most critical parts of the planning phase is determining what you're going to ask for. And that should be determined by a local risk assessment, needs assessment, or analysis of the needs in your local fire service department. Your risk assessment is super important because later on in the application phase, during the narrative section, you're going to have to reference it. The peer review panel will be looking for you to link what you request funding for to your risk assessment. So by doing a risk assessment, you are doing nothing more than walking around in your department, identifying the oldest items you have and what needs to be replaced. Then, once you have your own risk assessment or needs analysis, you cross-reference your needs with the funding priorities in the NOFO. And you're going to look at everything marked with a red H. And realize that what you request funding for, what's number one on your needs assessment, might not be high priority in the NOFO. You want to skip down on your needs assessment and request funding for only items that are listed as high priority for your agency type in the FY22 AFG application. Next, after you have done your own risk assessment, you're going to look at all of the critical infrastructure in your area. Critical infrastructure is simply our roads, our bridges, schools, hospitals, all tourist destinations, all of those places in our communities that you, the fire service professionals, are helping to protect. And again, when you get to the narrative portion of your AFG application, you're going to want to link what you're requesting funding to your risk assessment and the critical infrastructure that you are trying to protect. After you have that, you look up your NFIRS data. So right now we're in calendar year 23. We're going to need your NFIRS data from 2020, 2021, and 2022. And we're only looking for the aggregated numbers for each of the call volume series. So for fire calls, we're only looking for a total of those 100 series calls. So now you have your needs assessment, your critical infrastructure, your NFIRS call volume. Now you're ready to log into FEMA Go. Oh, quickly, grant writer fees. So you can request reimbursement for grant writer fees in your AFG application, but be aware that you will only get reimbursed for those fees if they are listed in your application budget at the time of application. And do be aware that you must procure those services competitively and follow your local procurement policy. Now we're on to the logging into FEMA Go for, to create your application. So as soon as you log into FEMA Go, I'm going to actually start from the bottom up for this slide. When you log into FEMA Go, the first thing that the system is going to ask you to do is to indicate what agency type you are. Are you a fire training academy, a nonprofit, a fire department? And that's super important that you indicate your correct agency type, because when you apply for an AFG award, you're only competing against like organizations. Okay? So non-affiliated EMS is only competing with non-affiliated EMS. And career fire departments are only competing against other career fire departments. So once you indicate your agency type. Then you're going to move on to indicate what type of AFG grant you want to apply for. What's super cool with the AFG program is you can actually apply for 3 different types of grants. You can apply for an ops and safety grant, which includes 5 different categories, a vehicle grant, or a regional grant, which is where you can choose to partner with other local agencies and could submit either an ops and safety or a vehicle application. I really want to emphasize how broad the ops and safety category or grant option is. You could, under this category, you can apply for training, equipment, PPE, wellness and fitness, modifications to existing fire facilities, and what's clutch is there's also a micro grant within the ops and safety grant application. So say that your department really wants to purchase new PPE equipment, and you tally up everything that you need, and it comes in less than $50,000. That's fantastic because microgrants only compete against other microgrants. So a microgrant is any grant that is $50,000 or less. So when you log in and you select your application type, if you're submitting an ops and safety application and it comes to $50,000 or less, be sure to click that it's a microgrant so that you can only compete with other microgrants. Next, your other type of application option is a vehicle acquisition. Applicants can request to replace unsafe fire apparatus, unsafe ambulances, or really old vehicles through a vehicle application. And certainly, last but not least, is the regional application. As noted earlier, that is when 2 or more departments combine to request a mutual need. Now, another cool thing about the AFG program is you can submit 3 types of applications. That's right, there's 3 different opportunities and 3 different grants that you can apply for to try and, get funding for fire-related services in your community. So you can do an ops and safety app, a vehicle app, and then go in and do a regional app. Or maybe, some of your equipment that needs to be replaced is $50,000 or less. You can do a micro grant, a vehicle app, and then a regional grant application. But what's really important to know is while you can submit multiple applications for an AFG grant, you cannot submit an application for the same items. So you cannot choose to go in on a regional grant application for, say, a vehicle and then also submit an individual department application for a vehicle. Brian, is there anything else you would like to add on this, at this point?
No, just if it's the same vehicle, same type of vehicle. You could ask for an ambulance in a regional grant and then ask for a ladder truck in your vehicle grant. So, but I think you hit it home. If you're a firefighter on this call, you could submit 3 applications: an ops and safety, a vehicle, and a regional. If you are an EMT that represents an EMS organization and you're on this call, you can submit an ops and safety, a vehicle, and a regional. The only people who can't submit 3 applications are state fire training academies. So, Rita, thank you very much. You explained that very well.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Next, if you are, again, ops and safety, there's 5 different application types that you can, or 5 different categories within this one application. So if you've done a needs assessment and you're like, what, our turnout gear is like really old, you can request turnout gear. Hey, say you want to do that as well as request, funding for behavioral health and immunization project. It's a great opportunity to get a lot of the high priority funding needs, met through your grant application. So then also here is a snapshot of the NOFO, and you can see the red H right here. Really, we want to emphasize to check, as Brian was kind of referencing earlier, check your agency type, because what's high priority, say, for a state fire training academy and what's high priority for, a career fire department might be different, such as simulators. You can see simulators are high priority for a fire academy, but not for a regional fire department. Brian, did you want to add anything there?
Nope, I think you hit that one nicely, Rita. Thank you.
Awesome. Next, we sort of touched on, hey, this great opportunity to get some old vehicles off the street, for any vehicle or unsafe vehicles off the street, for any vehicles manufactured prior to 1992 or any type of fire vehicle that has an open cab or is converted into a fire service truck, use this opportunity, and use this and apply for a vehicle grant. Listen, if you can do a regional application, if a couple other departments can agree to go in, with you on a regional application, it's a great way to, get more, to spread the mutual aid, reach more communities, help more people, and FEMA really likes that. We like to see, numbers. We like to see that the money you're requesting is going to help a lot of different people. So regional application I sort of touched on earlier, and, as we stated, you can absolutely request funding. You can submit 2 different application types, one for your local department and another for your regional department. You just cannot request funding for the same items. And frankly, we urge you to submit multiple application types. You have nothing to lose but time. So you've done your needs assessment. You know that you need a lot of equipment, but perhaps some of your regional partners also want to go in and do a joint effort for training. Great opportunities for, communities to work together and, meet both your local needs as well as your regional needs. So now that we talked about the 3 different application types and referencing, your individual agency type in your application, we're going to go into the narrative section, which is the section that most applicants begin to feel a little nervous about. But there's a lot of great tips on the FEMA website. There's something called, the Narrative Writing Guide. So definitely go onto our website, check that out, and start out in Word. You can easily type up your narrative for your grant application and copy and paste it into FEMA Go. Realize that the people that are reading your narrative section for your AFG application are fire service professionals. So you are speaking to a knowledgeable audience. They know what to look for. They know the funding priorities for, the FY22 AFG program. So it's really important to, use your resources and have other staff in the fire department, check out your application before you submit it. Be sure to make sure that you're linking, all of your applications. If you're going to submit a ops and safety app and a vehicle app and a regional app, realize that you're going to have to write a narrative for each of those application types, but definitely run it through other people in your department and ask them to make sure that they see the link between your needs analysis, your critical infrastructure, and that you utilize, your NFIRS data appropriately. Now, in the narrative section, there's actually 5 different sections. I know it sounds like a lot, but please don't worry. It's just basically talking about your department and what you need. First, you're going to begin with the community and agency description. Now, though it's not graded, you can see that the other 4 narrative sections are graded at 25% each, but I can't stress enough the importance of your community and agency description. Brian actually uses a really good analogy, like think of a Netflix series and, series 1. That's where you're determining, are you going to watch or not to watch? Are you going to watch the rest of the episodes in the season or not? So this is where you're really capturing your audience. This is where you are explaining to them who you are and, basically making them want to read on and read the rest of your narrative and buy into your need and want to help your community. When you're writing your narrative, you want to be sure to use local information, local statistics. Stay away from using national level data or like looking for national trends or requesting items because it's like the nationally cool thing to do, okay? You want to talk about your community, why you're asking what you're asking for, and why the AFG program should fund it. Next, the project description is a summary of what you want, how it is going to help your community, how much it costs, and how long it will take you to do. In your project description, you should specifically reference your risk assessment. and you should reference the details to describe your problem. Trust me, indicating that you did a risk assessment will help score you points. The peer panel reviewers are going to be looking for you to establish the link between your risk assessment and your funding request in the project description and budget section. So it's essentially your problem, your solution, and how much it's going to cost to fix and how long it will take you to do that. Sounds a lot like, we did a risk assessment. We found the following problem. X, Y, and Z are super old and they do not work anymore. The solution to that problem is to use AFG funding to buy this piece of equipment, and that piece of equipment, and it is going to help our firefighters and our community. It's going to cost this amount of money, and it is going to take us 2 years or the period of performance to do. The project description is pretty straightforward. The next narrative box is your financial need. And in this section, you want to make sure you reference and put down your internal department budget breakdown. How much money do you have coming in, and how much money do you have going out? If you have a capital project that is killing your budget, this is where you note that. You describe that, we had this financial need and explain why. Is there a 30-year-old tanker that you have that you are spending money on repairing every 6 months? So you're basically saying, we requested funding for this, this is what our current budget is, and this is why we can't afford it, and this is why we need the AFG program to fund us this item. Next, after your financial needs section narrative, you're then going to go into the cost-benefit narrative, and that's the fun part. That's where you describe, the cost-benefit of your AFG award. For this small amount of money, we're going to help X number of people in our community. We're going to help keep X number of firefighters safe. And if you give us this money, we can help a neighboring 5 communities with X number of people. This is where you really want to describe how far you can stretch those AFG dollars. Like indicated before, FEMA really likes mutual aid benefits. So talking about how you can increase your local capacity and local capabilities with this AFG award, as well as the capabilities of your neighbors, is really beneficial. Last, certainly not least, is the statement of effect. This is essentially like if you're writing if you recall any high school paper or any, college essay, this is where you're tying it all together. Your statement of effect is just your conclusion. You're taking your main points in your first 4 sections in your project description, your financial need, and your cost benefit, and you're putting them into one summary. You're going to reiterate the most important points and describe why we should give this AFG award to your community and explain how it is going to help your community and your firefighters. Again, in any of the narrative sections of your application, you really want to use locally specific information. As a person who has reviewed applications for other programs, all of the time we hear people reference national statistics. Don't do that. Reference your local community. Describe your local community and how this grant is going to help your local community and or the partners around you. And be sure to stay away from brand names. For some reason, the panelists don't like that and FEMA doesn't like that. You don't want to get locked into one, specific brand, because what if something cheaper becomes available elsewhere? So definitely, be sure to talk about your local statistics, explain your need, make the link from your needs analysis, to your request for funding. Be sure to only request funding for high priority items and keep it locally specific. I'm going to take a quick pause here. Brian, is there anything else I missed or anything you want to add to help everybody successfully complete a narrative?
No, I think you did a great job, Rita. I do also want to mention, I think maybe you mentioned it already, but there's a narrative development guide in the tools section of the FEMA website. Definitely a good place to check out some tips on narratives.
Awesome. Thanks for plugging that, Brian. Yeah. And again, next is, it's actually a great segue to our next slide. And my apologies for the slide. It's got some funky websites there. I'm not sure what happened. But on our FEMA website, you have the cost share calculator. the self-evaluation sheets. There's an application checklist and the narrative development guide, which Brian referenced. There will be the application workshop PowerPoint. And again, I can't stress enough the importance, of reaching out for help if you need it. You have Brian's contact information. You can email him, brian.thomas@fema.dhs.gov. You can also reach out to the AFG Program Help Desk, which is staff Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. But most importantly, I can't emphasize enough the need to prepare accordingly. The application deadline for the AFG program is just 10 days away. It's February 10th, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please don't wait until February 10th to submit your application. Expect technology delays. Expect that servers are going to get overloaded and overwhelmed. Get it in as quickly as possible. And, once you submit your application, you will receive an email notification from FEMA verifying that your application was received. All right? So at this point, I think you know the application deadline, you know the emphasis of or the importance of looking at the NOFO and only requesting funding for high priority items. I think I'm going to turn it over to Brian from here to help with questions in the chat.
Thanks, Rita. Can you click back to the contact slide that's got my email and phone number on it?
Yeah,
and put it up?
Happy to do it. Sure thing.
Deb, did you want to say anything before we went to Q&A?
Yeah, I'll moderate the Q&A, but I did want to thank Rita because I think she did a great job of going through that. There was a lot of information in a short amount of time, and I think she did a great job. I'll go through the questions, starting with if you wouldn't mind putting, either you or Rita wouldn't mind putting the link to the NOFO in the chat.
Absolutely, I can get that for you.
So, Deb, if you look at the downloads pod, I actually asked Anastasia to download or upload the NOFO. So the NOFO is right here in this room. If you're on the phone or you're on the webinar and you want the NOFO, it's right there.
Okay, good. Yeah, because, you wonder, is it, I heard her say 2022, we're in 2023. People should be looking for the 2022 AFG NOFO. Is that correct?
Yes,
that is correct, and that's the one that's attached. Yep.
Okay. I see a question, is the fire prevention and safety program also on the February 10th deadline? Is that a similar grant?
Different deadline. It's actually not currently open at the moment. The notice of funding opportunity is not published for that program yet. So the AFG program, the SAFER program, and the FP&S program all have their own individual NOFO, and they all have their own individual application period. Sometimes they're open at the same time, sometimes they're not. Right now, the only open grant application is for AFG. SAFER and FPS are going to come soon.
Okay, thank you. And I did see someone was asking about the recording for today's webinar. Sometimes it takes us a little while to get it up on the FEMA YouTube page. So when we go to the last slide, I will include the prepares email inbox. And if you need it before we publish it, we will have the link available tomorrow. Just send us an email, and we're happy to share that link with today's recording. We could send that out individually instead of waiting to anybody who wants it. Brian, what are some of the typical award amounts?
That's a good question, and it's all over the place. So it all depends on what you ask for. The one definitive answer to that is it'll be no more than $1 million. There are small rural departments that might ask for 7 to 10 sets of SCBA, which will be, like a $80,000 grant or something like that. And then there are some folks that are going to ask for, 50 sets of SCBA, a couple type of extrication tools, and maybe to send their folks to training. And that's going to be, an award of, $400,000 or something like that. So it's all over the place. It just really depends on what you ask for.
Okay, thank you. I heard Rita talking about the SAM number, and with the grant application deadline being 10 days away, how long does it normally take to get a SAM number?
SAM can be a huge roadblock or speed bump. It can take, 3 to 7 weeks to start from scratch. If you've never had SAM before and you're starting from scratch, it can take that long. If you've had a SAM registration that's recently expired, it may take a little shorter than that. But really the takeaway here is don't let it expire in the first place. Every year, I would say every 9-10 months, log into SAM and make sure that your SAM registration is active. Because once it expires, it could take you a couple weeks to get it renewed.
Okay. Thank you. You know, most of the FEMA grants, we have applicants and sub-applicants. Is this a direct grant program where it does not have to go through the state?
That's correct, Deb. This is a direct recipient program, so the money goes from FEMA to the fire department or FEMA to the EMS organization. You do not get the money through the state.
That's great. And the last question, and I'm going to ask the audience, if you do have any other questions, this is the last question that I see. Please type it in the Q&A pod now. But I was wondering if you wouldn't mind providing a few more examples of the high priority products that could potentially be grant funded through this program. I know Rita showed us some, you know, with the H's, but what are the more common high priority items that folks could apply for?
Yeah, some of the most popular things we give out are obviously your SCBA units. We give out money for turnout gear. So SCBA and turnout are the most popular stuff we give out money for every year. They're always a high priority. Extrication tools like cutters and spreaders and your jaws of life, those are very popular, whether they're battery-powered or hydraulic, always a high priority. FEMA loves to give out money for training. So if you want to send your staff to Firefighter 1 or Firefighter 2 training, fire officer training, EVOC training, swift water rescue, all kinds of, if you look at the NOFO, there's a bunch of training with high priorities. I think it's always a good thing to ask for. And then, you know, last but not least, I mean, there's many things, but as far as the most popular stuff goes, would be communications equipment. So P25 compliant radio comms, mobile radios, mobile repeaters, portable radios. That stuff is very popular and it's always a high priority.
Okay. Well, then I'm just going to ask if there's anything else that you want to add. I do not see any questions. Stacy just changed the screen to a poll view. I would ask the participants if they wouldn't mind answering those 6 questions. That really does help us drive our programming. Brian, anything else you want to add before I just go over the last 2 slides?
Just a reminder, February 10th is the deadline for the AFG program. Thank you, Rita, for sharing your knowledge on the subject matter. Really appreciate you doing the presentation. And thanks, Deb and your team, and Anastasia. Thank you very much for setting this up.
All right, you guys are great. We always appreciate having you here. For the audience, I'd just like to mention that we do have a few webinars coming up. Tips to avoid scams targeting older Americans. Be prepared to improvise. Predominantly that is for CERT. That is one of the best of that was offered at the CERT 2022 conference, and individual preparedness for older adults on February 15th. If you don't already subscribe to Region 2 News, you can subscribe here. I talked about our upcoming webinars. You could click on the first link, and all our recordings are at the second webinar, second link. As I mentioned, we may not get it up as quick as everybody needs it. So if you put something in the chat, we're not going to probably see it. But if you can send us an email to FEMA-R2-prepares, we'll send you the link right away. And we'll have that link no later than tomorrow available. So either this afternoon or tomorrow, we're happy to send it out and share it with you. Any last minute comments, Brian or Rita?
Nope. Thank you, everyone, for your time. We appreciate it, and please definitely reach out if you need any additional support.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone.